So can I hand over next to Professor Martin Bell, and I'm very grateful to Martin for stepping in at such a short notice today. So hopefully, Martin, you'll be able to share your screen and join us.
Okay, I'll
you.
just try and do that. Try and do that now. Share.
Right. Oh, no.
Can't see it.
Well, we've got your Zoom page. So maybe
should I get rid of that and
wrong screen? There we are.
Can you see that now?
Yes.
Oh. That's okay, is it?
Yes, that's
and you can hear me all right?
Yep, perfectly, Martin. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to just go through a few pictures of recent work at Goldcliff. This is very much prepared at the very last minute, in fact, while others have been talking, but I thought it might be useful for people to see some of these images, because many of them relate actually to discoveries made as a result of the three big storms that we had earlier this year. We've been monitoring the intertidal exposures at Goldcliff at almost every low spring tide for about the last 12 years. So some of the things I'm going to show you have just come up in the last month. Some were found in preceding years, but I wanted to mention that there is evidence of Pleistocene sediments and indeed some Paleolithic material from the intertidal zone. This picture shows at the bottom there, just about at water level, the Ipswichian beach, which is extremely shell rich, as you can see from the picture on the right. That's overlain by Devensian head deposits, which are the reddish brown sediments, and then by an old land surface with peat on, which is the level surface that you can see in the background. Now, one of the things that's come up as a result of the storms in the last month or so is a really good exposure of this Pleistocene bone bed, which is on the edge of the former Goldcliff Island. There's a lot of boss bone in particular, maybe bison, but one other earlier find actually from the 1990s is of a carnivore, and I've put some of the teeth from that skull. I mean, the skull was all there, but in tiny fragments, and hasn't been fully studied yet. But that's an interesting exposure of Pleistocene bone from the bed of the estuary. And there are a small number of 4 early Upper Paleolithic tools, all of them unstratified, and we haven't yet established from which particular horizon these are coming, but some of them are in more or less mint condition, which implies that this is not simply material that's been reworked from the head, and we're hopeful at some point that we may be able to identify perhaps a sort of interstadial land surface or something which these are derived from, but that's you know, that's just a hope for the future, really. This shows the situation at the end of February, just after the storm, when some good exposures occurred. Red deer antler there, nice little hollow scraper, and a bird's footprint. One of the things that we've been doing in recent years is mapping the intertidal zone using drone survey to pick up to map the Holocene, indeed Pleistocene sediments, and to relate those sediment exposures to the footprints which we've been recording at each low spring tide. So this shows one of the areas that we've worked on, and the red features are human footprint trails. And one of the nice things about these is that you can to some extent reconstruct patterns of connectivity in the landscape by the convergence points of footprint trails. Many of them, for instance, point to spots on the edge of the former island where we can infer that former settlement areas have been lost by erosion. Others point to the settlements that we've actually excavated. We've excavated 4 settlement sites which are published, and there are 3 others which we've been working on and recording steadily over the last 12 years. Indeed, one of them has only come to light in the last year, and that's by that submerged forest tree there that's marked in black on the left-hand side of this image. And it was right beside that tree, which in fact is shown at the bottom of the picture on the left here, and that's an oak tree, that earlier this month we were able to uncover this small Mesolithic hearth, which comprised about 25 heap fractured stones. But that's in a horizon which has been previously dated to about 5,600 Cal BC. And on the right hand side there's a deer bone which was found just a metre from this, but about 4 or 5 years ago. That deer bone is of interest because it is both cut, marked and burnt, and indeed isotopic evidence showed that that deer had spent part of the year grazing in a salt marsh environment. That's indicated by the higher nitrogen isotope levels in the bone. In the same area, just 2 or 3 meters from this, probably 10 years ago, we found a large sort of saddle quern-like feature, which was probably used for processing plant material. That was unstratified, but it had obviously tumbled from the vicinity of this hearth. I make these points to emphasize really the value of regular repeated visits building up a picture over years, because, you know, understanding this particular spot has really only come about as a result of several observations made at different times over 10 years. We continue to find some interesting human footprints, and indeed we had our best exposure in the last 10 years just at the beginning of this month. This shows some earlier examples from 2019. You can see 2 rather indistinct human footprints there, but the really nice thing about this particular picture is the occurrence of some really lovely little bird footprints, particularly the enlargement shown there at the bottom right. This is of special interest really from the nature conservation point of view, because all this of course lies within the National Nature Reserve of the Newport wetlands, which is a particular interest for its bird population. So what we're looking at here really in a sense is the time depth of that biologically important nature conservation site, especially important because there are many crane footprints in these deposits, and cranes have recently been introduced to the Somerset levels and have successfully bred in the Newport wetlands. So that's rather a neat example of how environmental archaeological work provides time depth for contemporary nature conservation interests. Here's one of the human footprints that we recorded in March this year. And here are some bird footprints from last September. These are little oyster catcher trail that we recorded during fieldwork for the Living Levels community project. But the most exciting discovery in the last 4 years has been right down in the bed of the Severn Estuary, where my colleague Tom Walker discovered during the laying out of targets for the drone survey a wood structure which we believe to be a Mesolithic fish trap, the only example known from England, Wales or Scotland. And this has radiocarbon dates about 5,000 Cal BC. You can see the sort of wattlework structure there on the picture at the top, and a little bit of it that we were able to lift at the bottom. I say only able to lift a little bit of the wattlework because this site is only exposed for about 90 minutes at the lowest spring tide. So it's a fair old challenge to do a conventional excavation. But you can see how beautifully worked the wood is from the picture on the left there. And here is a plan of what I think are probably 3 separate V-shaped fish traps. We believe these were probably used for catching eels because eels were the most common fish present in one of the excavated settlement sites, which is of about the same date on the edge of the island. And here you've got a picture of some of these wooden stakes in situ, picture of an eel at the bottom there, just to sort of add flavour, and a section of one of the stakes as well there, which seems to suggest that this wood was cut at the very end of the growing season. So maybe September, October, maybe the time when these people were there catching eels on their migration. Final point relates again to recent exposures. This shows the very top, the latest peat that we have on this site, which until very recently was covered up. There's been really substantial erosion, including movement of these great big rocks here, which I think relate to, in some way, to earlier seawall activity, but that's exposed some large trees and indeed further areas of Mesolithic activity. But these large trees are at a higher level than our previous investigations, and we believe they date to the early Neolithic period. And indeed, these have been sectioned by Nigel Nailing in the hope that we might be able to date them dendrochronologically. I think this is an important point because, you know, one of the problems that we have is this separation of the Mesolithic and the Neolithic. And some of these submerged forests offer a really vital context for looking at that transitional period. So we're with Scott Timpany, we're in the process of doing pollen work on this peat, which we believe will cover the early Neolithic period. And our hope is that we will be able to establish whether there are similar or different forms of land use or activity going on this site in the late Mesolithic and the Neolithic. In other words, we're sort of testing the hypothesis of continuity or change at this particular time. So I think that's me done. Sorry if it was a bit incoherent, but I normally give myself a bit more than 30 minutes to prepare a talk.
Thank you, Martin. It wasn't incoherent at all. That was fantastic. I don't think I